Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
It's spinning! It's spinning! Jonathan Sexton has made it!
Do you feel moderately happy?
No, I feel like I've been kissing my sister, I suppose.
In the pocket for his drop goal attempt. Here he goes, O'Gara. He's done it! That surely is the Grand Slam.
We target players all the time. That's part of rugby, isn't it? Let me know.
Sexton, wonderful pass and Stockdale finish. Grand Slam winners on St. Patrick's Day at Twickenham.
Yes, that sting can only mean one thing. The Six Nations is here. It has been a long January. If you're a rugby fan, suddenly this is your route through until March 20th, which is a nice thought. We are joined to discuss by Keith Wood. Hello to you.
Hi, Joe. How are you doing?
Very well. And Niamh Briggs, you're here as well. Evening, Niamh.
Hi, how are you?
So apologies, listeners. It's the Munster Mafia. Can you two try and not pick Munster players in every close call for the next half hour, yeah?
Totally one-eyed we have to be. We're two smiley heads in us here now, so we were having a chat before we came on air. So, like, you're only incidental to this conversation, Joe, if we're honest.
You're becoming increasingly incidental. Every time I look at you, you've lost weight.
Well, there you go. Sure, why not? It's a new year. Aren't you supposed to lose weight in the new year? So I'm a little bit of extra training, a little bit of sitting further from the table. No harm.
Okay, good man. Great to have you with us. So, Niamh, we should just touch on the situation in the Women's Six Nations, because there was news today, before we get into the men's action this weekend, of the new format. It's a bit different under the circumstances. 3 games instead of 5. This is going to start on the 3rd, 4th of April and finish across the 24th, 25th of April. In effect, we have 2 pools. And in Ireland's pool, it'll be France and Wales. So they'll play France second, Wales first away, France at home. And then, in effect, a bit like the Autumn Nations Cup, people will remember before Christmas, if you finish first in your little mini pool with Ireland, France, Wales, you'll play whoever is first in the pool of England, Italy, Scotland, and first plays first, and that decides the tournament winner. And not ideal. I mean, it's a weird thing to have a Six Nations where you may not play England or Scotland.
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, it's probably just positive that they're getting games. I think it's been a long time coming for them. They've had so many camps, and there's only so much training you can do, so much kind of like match type scenarios that you can take in before, nothing really equates to the match intensity. So from that point of view, I bet there's a little bit of excitement from them in terms of actual games. But the format, yeah, I really hope that it's just for this year, and then not something that would be continued, because they don't get to play a lot of games as it is, and if you go from 5 to 3, it's a big loss. So yeah, I'm still I'm very much I'm not really on the fence, but I actually don't really, while I say it out loud, I think it's great that they have games coming this April, but not really for me then going forward. No,
I think it's very much stopgap, and given the amateur status of everybody really bar England, COVID bubbles aren't possible. That's the issue here, Keith.
No, I think the logistics are incredibly difficult, almost impossible, when people are working and they're going out and they're seeing other people, or and you can't have that bubble. So I'm delighted that the competition is going even in this truncated fashion. And we have to get used to that this year. There's everything that we're going to go and watch is going to change some way. And like, we kind of wished all that was in the past and it was in last year, but I think we're going to see it to September, October of this year, where things are going to be abbreviated because they have to be, and we have to be content with the paler version of the sport that we get to see. But look, we haven't seen women's rugby for a while. It's great to see it back onto the field, and I think it's at the earliest possible opportunity for amateur sport to get there.
Because, Niamh, I know a few of the players even work on the front line. You know, they're right in the thick of this situation. Are any of them getting much rugby at the moment?
Yeah, not from an Irish perspective. I think the 5 or 6 girls that are based in England, their premiership started back up last week after a couple of weeks off, and they're now got stringent plans in place in terms of they get tested now over there as well, so that their club games can go ahead. The downside for that for Ireland is that they're over there now playing games and not attending Irish camps, and then the Irish girls are attending camps but playing no games. So it's going to be difficult. And they also have 2 World Cup qualifiers that look like they're going to be played before those Six Nation games, I think. So it's going to be a big squeeze and a big ask to get those girls back from England, I think.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. Do we know the nature of those World Cup qualifiers yet, who the opposition is?
Well, we know that it's going to be a Europe qualifier, so that still has to take place. So it's either going to be a Spain or a Russia, and then it'll be Italy and Scotland, I think. So it might not even now be March. They were looking at kind of the end of March. Now can we push back till June? And then that leaves probably not a huge amount of preparation time for New Zealand. August, September.
Niamh, just on player welfare, what sort of games or game-like situations will the women be able to play before those matches?
Well, to be fair to Adam and his staff, I think they've got a big number in camp. So they've had 2 internal games, one before Christmas, one after Christmas, as far as I'm aware. And, properly refereed and 2 very distinct teams. That's all they can really do. I think they've got to try and replicate as much match intensity. And it's very different, Keith, because I know when you were playing professional rugby that you would just probably do a lot of contact maybe pre-season, and then maybe kind of barely touch on it midweek. With Ireland, because they don't get to see each other very often, and then you're only in camp weekends, it's very robust in terms of they train Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There'll be contact probably in 2 or 3 of those sessions, because they have to try and get as much work and information across to the players as they can in that really short space of time. So it will be difficult for them, and I think that's just going to be a huge challenge for the coaching staff to try and get them as match fit and put them into situations where they're going to be under pressure all the time for a period of that session, and try and put their skills and tackle tech into good practice, I suppose.
If there's any silver lining, and there isn't much of one really, it'll be an interesting test case to have the women's game owning those Six Nations weekends as opposed to competing for attention with the men's, across the media week. That's something. It's not much, but it's something, Niamh. I don't know if you felt as a player sometimes it was tough having the women's and the men's Six Nations on at the same time.
No, when I was playing, to be honest, I was just concentrating on playing. I don't think that was ever really anything to the forefront of my mind. I think now, as I'm not playing, I can see, that they're trying to fight for as much game time and air time as possible. But it's been in the plan, I think, for a while that the Six Nations was going to move windows. So we're going to try and move it away from the men's to try and see if it'll bump up. But yeah, look, I think, as you say, it'll be very interesting to see, and I think there'll be a lot of positive and a lot of numbers and viewers watching it now, because we don't have a huge amount of live sport to get back to. So while rugby can continue on, hopefully, and hopefully the girls can play well, just so that people that haven't really seen it before will remain interested in it. Yeah, for sure. Well, exact dates and venues and kick-off times all to be announced in due course was the word today. To matters at hand this weekend, Cardiff beckons on Sunday for Ireland. England host the Scots. It's the 150th anniversary of the Calcutta Cup. Thank you very much. And then we'll start the tournament on Saturday with France versus Italy in Rome. Keith, the more we build up to this Wales game, the more nervous I get, because I'm not finding many people predicting anything other than an Irish win. And yes, they're off the back of a terrible year, Wales, 3 wins in 10 matches. And yes, they are post Gatland and Edwards, but it's just, it's hard not to feel that like we can swan over to Cardiff for the first time in 2013 and feel so confident of a win.
Yeah, I get a bit uncomfortable with that too. Not quite as uncomfortable as you do, which is quite interesting. For me, there are almost two opportunities. We could lose over there, we could be ambushed, or we could beat them by 20 points. That's what it feels like for me. And it's the 20-point part of it is the bit that makes me feel uncomfortable. So I don't think we played anywhere near as well as we could play in the last Six Nations, again in that strange Six Nations. But I thought Wales were almost totally at sea. And yet they are still well able to play. They have lost some of that discipline that they had under Sean Edwards, which, look, we've seen what the impact he's immediately had on with France. So that guy has gold dust and he sprinkles it over, partly because of the changes that Wales were making. That dust seems to have been shook off quite quickly, and they looked a little bit disorganised. They had a few retirements, they had a few injuries. Now, we had elements of that too. So we moved away from an incredibly focused, detail-oriented, specific game plan to a game plan that maybe would have a little bit more natural intuition into it, and we struggled with bits of that. So I never like it when we're considered to be overwhelming favourites going away from home, and even though there's nobody in the crowd, it still is a daunting and an unusual place, and they may close the roof, and that could make it even more unusual. It'll be an echo chamber in many respects. So I think Ireland are a better team at this point in time. If they perform properly, I think they'll get the win. But if they take anything for granted, and if everybody continues to say Ireland just win comfortably, it's the second you take something for granted in the Six Nations, you lose. And we've said this every year for I don't know how many years, and it's boring to say it, but it still happens to be true. Like, you get a win, you start with momentum. You get a loss, and you're not thinking about the next year, but some of your focus changes very quickly. And like, Ireland have to go into this with a view of just being incredibly accurate and building on what they've been trying to do under Andy Farrell. And he still has had a very little time to have an impact.
The schedule, by the way, and it ties in with your point about momentum, is obviously Cardiff this Sunday, and then it's France the following Sunday in Dublin, and then draw breath for a week, and then Italy is the middle game, another week off, and suddenly you have Scotland away, and then England in Dublin. And Niamh, you look at that, and suddenly the importance of this game is magnified even further, because God, you take all that momentum of a win on Sunday into France coming to Dublin rather, and geez, like, you're tempted to say, God, with feel-good factor, we could be sitting pretty with 2 wins and Italy to come, and then, well, hey, we're into a very interesting last week, and yet you lose in Cardiff and things, that picture becomes very grey all of a sudden.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you, as Keith said, if you don't win your first game, it puts a heap amount of pressure on you in terms of the mindset changes. The following week at camp becomes a different kind of atmosphere in terms of the pressure that you're putting on yourself. So yeah, I think this weekend is going to be huge. I think that in terms of the pressure that I listened to Johnny Sexton on Off the Ball last week, and he said it can either go 2 ways. You can either have a really good second week in camp, or it can be a very long second week in camp, and that's basically the matter of fact of it. And I think it's always the year that you have France and England at home, you always feel like you have a sniff of being able to go and do something really good.
Wales causes for hope. They had Byron Hayward as their defence coach last year post Edwards, and it seems he was coaching a different type of defence to Edwards, and the players just didn't seem to like it, was very much the word, and there was grappling all year, and he was out the door in November. So Gethin Jenkins has come in now on board, and he is very much an Edwards disciple. So straight away you've got this Wales team with that old Edwards defence DNA, something they'll be comfortable with, something they'll understand, and I suspect will give them a degree of confidence. And then the other point is, after his terrible year last year, Wayne Pivac knows he has to win, and so he's called in the generals, and this squad now is suddenly experienced. Like, you've got Alwyn Jones in, Tipurick's back fit, Navidi, Faletau's back fit, which is big. Ken Owens, and like a bellwether inclusion is Dan Lydia, 33 years old, out of it for 2 years, very much back in. So Clive Woodward said, I look at their back row, Tipurick, Faletau, Navidi, finally reunited. There's none better in the world. I watch the halfbacks like Bigger and Davies, and this team has so much more. Ireland will enjoy a strong tournament, but I'm tipping Wales to nick this one. So all of that is contributing to my nervousness.
Okay, well, Clive is well able to stir the pot when he gets a chance to, and I would look at that back row and say, my God, that back row was absolutely fantastic 5 years ago.
Okay.
But not today. I don't think Faletau has really shook off the injuries to get to the form that he has. He's one of my favourite players. Dan Lydiot is a wrecking ball, and his ability to hit low, to make that tackle, he often gives away penalties, and they're clamping down on that an awful lot, that they need an arm in the tackle, and he is tackling at grass height, and if he gets that wrong, that's penalties for us. It could be yellow cards for us. So they're the things that actually happen with it. I think they're a fantastic group of players. I just think Ireland are. They're not all younger, and with Caelan Doris being out injured, that's a shame. But there are a lot of young guys in around that team, and like if we play to their strengths, to let them stop us, to get Tipperick in over the ball, which he does incredibly well. He still does that very well. If we leave that exposure, that's our own fault. And I think, for me, I think you look at that team and you say, okay, we know that the second somebody goes to ground, Lydia's going to knock them early. That's the nature of it. Tipperick is going to be pouncing in on it. We have to make certain that Tipperick is taken away from that contact immediately.
Okay.
Now, so you have to look at it. I actually think it sharpens the focus on exactly what they're going to do at breakdown.
So those two, Lydia and Tipperick, will hunt in pairs, and Ireland have to target that and make sure that if you see one go in, you know what's coming. Well,
Warburton he wrote this week about playing with Lydiate.
Yeah.
He said he was his favourite guy to play with, because he said he actually knew exactly what was going to happen, and his focus wasn't on two or three things; it was on one thing.
It's funny, we had Paul O'Connell and Warburton on sort of late last year before O'Connell was announced, and he was talking at length about facing that duo, and he knew exactly what to expect from them. So I guess, the Irish camp will be well aware. I presume easier said than done, but not impossible, Keith. I think we should be in the right space for that to happen, but we need to make certain that we win the contact, and that's how we impose ourselves on Wales. It's actually where we are best, is when we knock their back row off kilter. We get a better opportunity to run onto the ball. So I think it's tough. I think it's tough on both sides, and actually when that happens, you're just going to see the right battle royal around ruck time. And some of our ruck play since the World Cup in 19 has been pretty sloppy. So that I can guarantee you was one of the things that Ireland have been working on. It all begs the question, Niamh, what's the Irish back row? Doris out, which is such a pity, and he has symptoms associated with concussion as well, it turns out, and you think of his debut last year, so you just wish him well and hope he takes all the time he needs. So Doris out, and Lawrence Deladio was saying this week he thought Doris would be the number 8 of the tournament, so it's a real pity. The talk seems to be certainly Stander at 8, O'Mahony's form to be rewarded, and then one of Connors, Rhys Ruddock, Van der Fleer, Tadhg Byrne. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think it could be Pete at 6 and Josh at 7, and then CJ at 8. I had great kind of hopes and was really looking forward to seeing Doris playing, because I thought he was really in brilliant form over the Christmas period. I thought, he was really starting to get back what we know he was good after that last year. So, and he'll be disappointed because of obviously getting the start last year and then getting knocked out in the first few minutes. And but his ability to get over the gain line, we don't have many players like that. And I would go with Josh Van der Fleer, just because I think he's a better all-rounder than Will Collins at the moment. I think his game appreciation, his knowledge in around the breakdown, but also ball in hand. I think Will Connors is a bit like Dan Lydiate in terms of he's an unbelievable chop tackler. But we have to remember that when they chop tackle, they're kind of gone then for the next phase or two. And because they're basically at the bottom of the ruck and can be easily be pinned to the ground. So you have to look then at the overall game. So if Pete's going to be there on the ground, well then you have someone like Josh out supporting CJ Sander. So I think that will probably be the back row, and I think Rhys Ruddock's probably in the form of his life. So, does he jump in and get a bench spot? I'm not sure. It's just about the balance, I think, of that back row. And if one comes off, how do you slot everybody else around it? Okay,
that's interesting. I hadn't heard many people talking up Van der Fleer. Keith?
Yeah, look, I like Van der Fleer. I like Connors. Connors is a big chop tackler. For me, it depends who's in the second row, and if they go with Tadhg Byrne in the second row, he is going to be able to get an awful lot of turnovers. Do you actually make an adjustment in the back row? Do you decide to keep CJ at 8? Do you put Pete at 7, not just for for robbing the ball, which he does. He doesn't do as well as Van der Fleer, but he does it a fair bit. But also for the line-out as line-out option. And do you reward Rhys Ruddock with a place at 6 and give us a bit of additional ballast in that pack, because he gets through an unbelievable amount of work. That would be an unusual back row, but would that have the balance that we require? It might well have. And it may be the case sometimes when you're playing a pure out and out 7, which Tipuric is, and you say, well, can we out 7 him? And we mightn't be able to. So what we might do instead is target him. So the second he goes anywhere near anything, we clear him out first and foremost. And you're not both vying for the ball at the same time. That could put a different dynamic into it too.
Well, I guess we'll find out tomorrow, so there's no point wasting too much time teasing all of that out. To broaden out the conversation for a moment, Niamh, Joe Schmidt has kind of changed expectation levels to a degree in this country, like 3 championships with a Grand Slam thrown in. Trying to get a feel now from different pundits for what is an acceptable to good Six Nations championship for Andy Farrell.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day because I was doing the depth chart for the back 3, and I was just wondering, what is it a case that they have to win their home games? But yet on paper, probably, or in the last year, England and France have probably been ahead of them in terms of their performances, their ability to move the ball. France come with a different dynamic because they're missing Bakhtara and they've had other injuries. And then England just seem to be really powerful at the moment. So I think they've got to gain confidence and momentum. So I think if they can win on Saturday or on Sunday, then that can change the dynamic, because they welcome France, and France aren't always brilliant travellers. And, as I said, they're missing some key players. So, and it just comes down to last day game. I think, for me, I'd love to see progression. I'd love to see progression in attack. I'd love to see progression in the game plan. I'd love to see us getting away from running at bodies and and moving the ball to space. And if that was the case and we had to sacrifice a game here or there, then with the view of progressing into the next couple of years, then I think I'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, because Keith, there'd be grumblings if it was 4th or worse, you'd have to suspect. 3rd almost depends on maybe the nature of the performances, not least against England and France.
Well, I actually, strangely, one of Niamh's points on the performance, yes, we'd love to have all the wins, but we do need to see a bit of a progression. I also think that this particular year is unusual, because what does home advantage mean now? I'm not quite sure what it means when you've no crowds. How does it affect the ref? The big pressure comes on the last 10 or 15 minutes. How does not having 60, 70,000 people in the crowd, how does that affect them or not? I'd like to see us move to playing a little bit more football. I think we've seen a bit more from time to time. I don't like the idea that we stick to the box kick. I think it's part of our game, but it can't be all our game. We need players running onto the ball a little bit more. We need to protect that ball a little bit more. So it's a little bit of a blend of what Joe did really well, that precision, but also a little bit more risk. I think we can afford to take more of a risk now, and that progresses the team a little.
I'd love to see us bring a second playmaker in, someone like a Hugo Keenan. It's clearly not going to be if he plays Bundy at 12 or Robbie Henshaw. I don't think it's got to come from there. I think it's got to come from elsewhere, whether it's Ringrose or that full-back role, and then that allows us then to be able to play with width that we haven't really done as much.
And how does that look, Niamh? So if we're watching on Sunday and I'm keeping an eye on Hugo Keenan, for instance, and it's a position well, for him to be operating as a second playmaker, what's he doing? Is he taking the ball instead of Johnny at times? Is that what you mean?
No, but you take control out further, so you have longer. Johnny's really busy in terms of trying to manage the forwards and see what's kind of there in front of him, whereas you've got a way bigger scope, so you can actually demand the play or the ball and wider channels because you can see where the space is. It's also a case of coming like on a two-sided side of attack on either side of the ruck. You demand the ball back on a blind side or something like that. It's just keeping the defence very honest. It stops any sort of rush because they don't know where the ball is going, and it just allows you then to play more heads up, but also gets more players involved. I think at the moment, if I'm defending Ireland, I know I just have to defend that pod that's coming around the corner and defend Johnny, because I can rush them, put them under as much pressure as I can, because we don't offer a threat anywhere else. And I think we can't progress in terms of the, world standings in the game that we want to play if we can't bring other people into the game.
Yeah, I was just looking. One of the elements that I would love to see more of is our wingers get involved more often in the game. So Johnny May turns up, he's rucking half the time and picking and jamming because he's not waiting for somebody else to get in. He wants to get involved there. Jack Noel, you'll often see having a bit of a cut, but running blind lines behind 9 and 10. Mix it up a little bit more. We keep a shape. We've kept a shape for a period of time for things to break down, and it requires a mistake on a defensive setup for us to break it down a lot of the time. I'd like to see some of the individual skills of some of our players be used and be utilised a little bit more. So to say, if you see something, have a cut. If you sometimes you can override. You need to be able to override and play what you see in front of you. And like supporters will often say, well, sure, isn't that just obvious? You play what you see in front of you. It isn't with the way defences have gone. There's so little space out there. Sometimes you have to do prescribed roles, but after that happens for 2 or 3 phases, chinks appear, and but also an opportunity might appear, and you need to override what's been called for that to happen. So I think that's where we can get to see a little bit more. I love the idea of two playmakers. I often think it's too much to have on just one guy, that everything has to go off him. I would hope that we'll attack the gain line a little bit more as well. I think that's something we haven't seen, but a lot of that depends on the type of defence that you're playing against, and we don't know until the first 5 or 10 minutes of the game is exactly what sort of defence they're going to have.
Yeah, you might have to react on the hoof. All right, money where your mouth is. Give me a score prediction then, each and Niamh.
I think Ireland will win 22-15 maybe.
Okay.
Score? I'm not going to give a score.
Keith, give us a score.
Get off the fence and give them a score.
I think we click, and I think we might score a few tries this time. So I think we'll be high 20s. I think we'll beat them by 15 points. Okay, very good. So, in a sentence, what's all this confidence based on? Because I'm not seeing the evidence to support all this. Why are we going to click in a sentence or so, Keith? What's the... Look, I think we've been a very good team that has had a change of coach. Now, I know Wales have had the exact same situation. I feel we're ready to fire. I feel there's a tiny bit more freedom in Ireland, and I know we didn't see it in the autumn, and I think there's a level of frustration. Okay. And I'm hoping that is what is the catalyst to push it over the edge. And if you push it enough over the edge, but I'm saying it might be down to one score with a couple of minutes to go. That's the difference of what this sort of rugby is. It might be only in the last 5-10 minutes that Ireland get a chance to pull away.
Okay. Our rugby coverage here on Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team of us, everyone in. We have Niamh Briggs and Keith Wood with us. So tournament starts in Rome with France against Italy. Intermac obviously is out. Matthew Jalibert, who started that game famously against Ireland in Paris when Johnny Sexton kicked the drop goal he was 19. I think he played 15 times for Bordeaux at the time. He's back in, given Intermac's injury, it would look like. We haven't had the team yet. 22 years of age, apparently playing very well in the top 14. Like Keith, last year France, they had one slip up at Murrayfield, and otherwise the Grand Slam was theirs. So they have Twickenham and they have Dublin, which won't be easy. At the same time, given their age profile, you'd expect them to continue improving.
The big difference, it wasn't that they slipped up, and we can often say that France will slip up and they don't like going away and blah, 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 and all the cliches. But it was the first time that they looked like, I think, a French team of the 80s and 90s, where they were able to merge youth, skill, incredibly deep running lines and angles with a fairly brutal performance from big ball carrying forwards. They looked a very complete team, but they looked a very raw team. So 1 year later, and it's not a year, but next competition, how much have they progressed from that without losing that joy that they seem to have found again? So look, we all know that their plan is a drive to the 2023 World Cup, not to host it. They are already hosting it. They want to win the tournament. Everything that they're doing is there. They seem to be playing with a little bit less pressure because it's growing over a longer period of time. It's an unusual mindset and one that seems to suit them perfectly, and they're able to shrug their shoulders, cliche again, and then say, yeah, okay, we lost a game here, but we think this is working for us on the long term. I just think they keep bringing guys that their skill level is fantastic. I always say it for France, which is one of my favourite teams to watch and one of the least favourite to play against. When the ball is hitting the tip of their fingers just perfectly so that they have to accelerate onto it, you know you're in huge trouble. And they did that for most of last year.
Niamh, it's hard to know what to say about Italy at this stage. They obviously have Garbisi, the 20-year-old out half, coming through and showing a bit of promise. They have lost Minozzi and Pellegrini. They are 27 matches and counting without a win in this competition. And I don't know, it's hard to see them getting one in 2021, to be honest.
Yeah, completely. I think they're going to struggle big time. And I think while Garbisi is a huge talent and he obviously looks very comfortable even at that, at that young age and at that level, losing Pellegrini is going to be huge for them, because he's kind of like their drag the game by the scruff of the neck, try and keep players in, try and keep Italy in the game as long as they can type of a player. And so that'll be really difficult. And what we've seen from them over the last probably 12-18 months wouldn't really inspire you too much, to be honest. And they haven't really kicked on from any good work. They had a couple of seasons ago, they had an okay campaign and a good campaign for them, but they haven't really kicked on too much, and their club game isn't really, wouldn't really give you much confidence either. So I think, they'll struggle this time around again, I think.
I heard Sam Warburton on during the week. He was on a different podcast, and he was just saying, we're reaching a point here where something has to be done, and he was advocating relegation, and whoever's bottom of the Six Nations gets a home playoff against next team up from the second tier competition, and that's just the way it has to go, as much as people enjoy their trips to Rome. Where are you in all that?
I would rather see the Italian sides playing in the French, maybe second division, maybe with an opportunity of getting up to the first division. And I'd rather see a competition that might have something very close with a high sense of rivalry. I think we've manufactured a rivalry in the Pro 14. I think we're trying to do that again with the South African teams that come in. They're not a rivalry. It's not something that is based on anything. And you mentioned at the start of this that we're talking about the 150th Calcutta Cup. That's rivalry. That's something that's been built up over a long period of time. I don't think it has worked really well. I don't think we can go back to Five Nations. I don't quite know how you have relegation. There's no way in the world that the original Five Nations would ever have the risk of having it there, and nor should they.
Yeah.
Look, and we know that Italy are an important part of the Six Nations, have been very important in terms of votes for World Cup and all those sort of things, and they have a stake within it. But it isn't working and hasn't worked. And it's funny that one of the high points of my post-rugby career was being in the Stadio Olimpico watching Italy beat France. It was just incredible a few years ago, 5 years ago. And I think it was the zenith of their rugby journey, because I think they have been pretty much lost afterwards. When there's a coach changes every year, every 2 years, things are not right and not stable. But for a team that is at the top table, they should be getting better all the time, and they're not.
Yeah. And we're not looking for miracles. I mean, even if they were just a genuine potential banana skin once every 2 years, just that bit of jeopardy in their games, absolutely fine. You kind of live with that. You can't have every team pushing to win the thing, but at the moment it feels like it's a gimme.
Yeah, well, I think they are potential banana skins, but that can't be the limit of your.
Well, I don't know if they are 27 games in 0. It's not much of a banana skin.
Yeah, strangely they're tough games for forwards actually, because they're incredibly physical, very hard, technically good at scrum time. So they're tough games, okay. And you know the fear, and I tell you what, the fear factor of being one of the teams that loses against them makes it tough too. Actually, I remember talking to Zinzan Brook over the Irish record, and he said they used to discuss in the All Black camp that they never wanted to be the guy that lost that record, that lost to Ireland, that was one of the driving factors, and it terrified them sometimes. You know, so look, pressure is strange things. I love going to Rome. It's my favourite place to go to watch a game. I love the city. I think it's brilliant. But look,
we're clutching at straws now.
No, they need to be a viable option.
Yeah, they do.
And they haven't been.
Finn Russell, Niamh, to swoop into Twickenham and lead Scotland to a 7-try bonus point victory. Discuss.
No, I think England will probably be too strong for them. I think, albeit their preparations have been a little bit COVID disrupted, I think they've got a really good, platform. They have really good structures in place. They have a really good continuity in their squad. So yeah, I do think that they'll be too much for them, and I'm still not sure if Finn Russell fits into that Gregor Townsend Scotland environment. He's very much play in front of what you see, and I'm not sure that they at that level. I'm not sure. Look, I love watching him. I love watching him for Racing. I think he's a super player, but in Racing it seems like everybody else is on the same page as him, and that's when it works, and that's why it looks so good. I'm not sure Scotland will be, and so I don't know, will they get the best out of him.
Where are you on Russell these days, Keith?
I think he'd terrify me to play with him. I like watching him at times, and you kind of want to give him a kick in the butt at times. He has an ability to unlock like very few others do. Again, Niamh has nailed it. Provided everybody else is tuned into him, then they can actually be very dangerous. But it requires a huge amount of discipline to have, I'm going to say, ill discipline that he has at out half. It's not that, he just reacts to absolutely everything. And he does see things in a slightly different time. And that makes it very interesting. And I go back to Gregor's days, when Gregor played at his best and most effective, and he was very similar to Finn in many ways. He played incredibly effective when you had a strong guy outside him who took a lot of the pressure off him and actually was able to tidy up some of the more unusual decisions that were made.
And so what of England then, Keith? I mean, the kicking game roundly discussed as incredible. Their defence is suffocating. They are unbelievably physical. They have a sprinkle of Johnny May X Factor thrown in. They have Farrell at 12. They're pragmatic as well, which kind of suits Six Nations. They seem pretty awesome, to be honest.
Yeah, they do. I think Billy Vanapola hasn't been at the levels that he's achieved. I think they win matches, but they're hard to like. They kick the leather off the ball. It's the most pragmatic. I like pragmatic and I like winning games, but it's also, we have to enjoy this well. I know that Eddie Jones says often his answer is our job is to win games, like we're not there for entertainment. Well, I can tell you that at the present moment in time, the world needs to be entertained somewhat, and we're not getting that much entertainment from watching England play. Maybe partly because it's England, and if somebody else was doing it and winning, we might be happy with that, and if we were doing it and winning, maybe. But look, I think it needs to free up a little. I really do, and it's interesting because you're watching all the 10s that are flying in England. You've Marcus Smith at Quins, who just gave a masterclass at the weekend. You have Simmons in Exeter, who just is a joy to watch. He plays with a smile on his face, and has a go, attacks all the time, and yet England have gone for a very pragmatic 10 or choice of 10s. that's fine. Actually, I'd like my 10 to be a good playmaker, but to be pretty conservative. Johnny Wilkinson is one of the great examples of that. He would do the right thing all the time, and you're expecting a bit of spark from somebody else. But England are almost taking that pure spark out of the team down to pure industry and efficiency, and it's effective, but it isn't very attractive. Now, it comes down to that idea whether you want to win or whether you want to entertain. I can't understand why you can't do both.
Well, we had that wild 38-all draw 2 years ago, so maybe we get something kind of quirky and mad like that again. So I'm sensing Ireland, France, England are the predictions from both of you for this weekend. Punditry is no fun if we can't at least document your predictions to throw egg on your face later on. So who's going to win the Six Nations? Will it be a Grand Slam? And where are Ireland in the reckoning when it's all done and dusted? Niamh Briggs.
I think as much as Kilsey said, I think England will win the Six Nations. I just don't see anybody being able to break them down. They're robotic almost, and it's difficult to see where the chink in their armour is, that weak link.
Grand Slam secured in Dublin or no?
Oh, I hate that. No, I refresh my memory. Are England playing France in France
Twickenham.
or at home?
Twickenham.
Oh yeah, no. I don't think there'd be a Grand Slam this year. I think they'll all take a win or a loss off each other, and I think Ireland were doing really well to get second.
Okay, Keith.
I don't think there'll be a Grand Slam. I think France might do it this year.
Right.
They might win the championship this year. I think they might use this as the opportunity to put all their eggs in the basket of beating England and Twickenham, not writing it off. Not that they write it off, but a lot of their focus could be on that. I think we could do a decent number on them. I think we come in second, third. That's where it's going to be, and no shame in any of those. I'd like us to be able to push it a bit further, but I think both those teams are a little bit more advanced in their preparation than we are.
Okay, very good. Well, listen, the fun and games begin. Niamh Briggs, Keith Wood, thanks very much.
Pleasure, great show.
Thank you.
Wednesday night rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.